is France, the streets of Paris. And this is a communist parade. All these people are communists, and there's a lot of them. They march along shouting the same slogans that are shouted on Red Army Square in Moscow. Stop the war in Indochina. Down with germ warfare. Unite with Russia for world peace. Look and listen for a moment. Look at the signs they carry. U.S. Go Home, symbol of hatred for America. A mock attack on a boy dressed as an American MP. Horseplay with sinister undertones. In the parade, you see big banners with innocent-sounding names. The Union of French Women, a phony title for a communist front organization. This is to celebrate their latest hero, a communist writer who won a Stalin Literary Prize for a party-line novel. And here comes the main body of the procession, the communist-dominated trade unions. Unions that are mobilized to protect the interests of Soviet foreign policy and that have betrayed at every turn the interests of the French workers. This is the minority that would like to push France into the hands of Stalin. This is Paris, too, another kind of parade. Loyal Frenchmen marching in a display of France's growing military strength. But France is the firm ally of America and the Western powers, and its new army is already playing a big part in the defense of peace. French combat troops stand guard in Germany, in Africa, in Asia, with the United Nations in Korea. And France has its own Korea in the War of Indochina, where 250,000 troops are struggling to stem communist aggression. Not just the French army, but the overwhelming majority of Frenchmen are determined to protect their republic from attack, within or without their borders. Let's leave the parades and the shouting to hear France's basic problems stated by a French Democrat. Here, in the office of the French Socialist Party, is Guy Mollet, leading French statesman, vigorous anti-communist and fighter for the French working man.
The recovery of France since 1948 has been amazing, but there still remains the problem of giving everyone a fair share in this recovery. Up to now, the benefits have tended to stay near the top, and too little, if ever some, has reached the workers. This is the problem we have to solve. And for that purpose, the worker must have a voice in his unions, a voice in his own community, a voice in the government, a voice to speak for him loudly and strongly.
Let's go out to where the workers live. Quarter of an hour from the smart cafes of the Champs-Élysées, but it feels like 1,000,000 miles. Driving up here is an American trade unionist who works for the U.S. government, a man who has studied at close quarters the problems of the French worker.
My name is Joe Heath. I'm an AFL ship's electrician, presently employed by the Mutual Security Agency to work on labor problems here in France. Before I came here, I was in Greece for 2 years, where the commies tried to take over by force and civil war. And there's not much chance of them doing that here in France at the present time. However, they are strong enough. They're a very strong minority, strong enough to have collected 1/4 of the total votes cast in the last national election. They used to be stronger, particularly in the trade union movement. But in 1948, they made a mistake. The communists, on instructions from the Common Forum, were told to sabotage the Marshall Plan. The thousands of French workers who saw hope in the Marshall Plan refused to follow them and broke away. They formed free trade unions of their own, and now, even though the communists control the biggest union in France, they cannot call a major strike on their own, and they're slowly but steadily losing ground. Even so, if you're a French worker living here in the outskirts of Paris, you'd be likely to vote communist, and you'd probably belong to a communist-dominated union. Why? Take a look around here. This is the Paris that a tourist never sees. Thousands of French workers live in slums just like these. This is the great paradox of France. In a country where production has soared beyond pre-war levels, where the basic necessities are plentiful, where the land is rich, the worker does not earn enough to lead a decent life. That is why a lot of them fall for communist promises of a new world where things will be different and better.
Well, you've only got to walk around the back alleys to see that things could be a whole lot better for the workers of Paris. Sure, some of the streets may even look quaint and picturesque from the outside, but if you go inside, you find crowded tenements with plumbing 100 years out of date. It's in quarters like these that the communists concentrate their propaganda, because it's here they find the likeliest recruits. That boy who's trying to earn a few francs by selling firewood. Those kids playing ball against a wooden fence. They have the party line in front of their eyes every day of their lives. Posters slapped up on the fence. Slogans scrawled on the wall. But the anti-communists are putting up posters to reply to the big lie, to expose the phony promises and the phony peace campaign. Stalin holds a sign saying peace in one hand and a club in the other. There's a takeoff on the communist peace symbol, an armor-plated dove with a gun for a beak. Stalin the Cossack dances over the satellite states, aiming his daggers at the heart of France. But the real struggle for the French worker is not fought on the Paris walls. Here is Victor Ruther, European representative of the CIO, to tell you why.
The more I get around in France and talk with factory workers, the more convinced I am that there is real hope for democracy here in this country. We, of course, must help them find some way out of the desperate economic conditions which lead some 5 million Frenchmen to vote for the Communist Party. We must also find some way to wrest out of the hands of a communist minority the control of the free trade union movement which they have captured. We must build down at the factory level, in the workshops and mines, a strong, vigorous free trade union movement. The challenge to communist control has already been given, and I am convinced there is the strength and the will down in the shops to build that kind of free trade union organization. Of course, you can't wrest control out of the hands of the communists merely by anti-communist slogans. We must match our democratic idealism with practical accomplishments and achievements. The free trade unions, to put it bluntly, must find the means for substantially raising the standard of living, the wages, and improving the working conditions of French workers.